Hello and welcome to the Google Slides. So why did I choose Stalin? Well, I chose Stalin because, for lack of a better phrase, he's my favorite dictator to learn about. And why did I focus on his early life? Because I like backstories for historical figures, for people I know. I want to know the backstory. What was your childhood like? What was your early life like? So that way, it helps me click together the person a little more. Like, if you had my backstory, you could probably click together a lot of why I am the way I am. So I like looking at these big famous people, these dictators, these world changers, and be like, this is where you started. These were your parents. This was your upbringing. So what were the three turning points in Stalin's early life before becoming a dictator that brought him to where he was when he was at the height of power? What were the building blocks for this world power? What were the building blocks for this dictator? So, number one, we gotta look at Stalin's really early life. Who were his parents? Where did he live? Well, he was born in Gori, Georgia. He wasn't even Russian. But later on, when he was dictator, he would refer to Georgia as that little part of Russia that refuses to admit that they're Russia. I don't understand it. He had such Georgian pride, but referred to them as part of Russia. Anyway, he was born there to his parents, Kiki. I probably butchered it. It's Keke, and Besiaron Jugashvili, which I also probably butchered that. That was his father. His mother was a pious girl, and his father was a drunk. And his father abused him and his mother to the point where his mother kicked him out, or he left. And after that, his mother took to beating Stalin to get him to do, she believed in, very tough love. She did really love her son, but she thought that was what was best for him after removing the abusive influence in his life. Now, there was a lot that went on with his father as the years went on. He tried to take Stalin a few times to work in his factory on the other side of town. His father lived on the part of town with a lot of Russians, and as a child, Stalin was referred to as the Little Russian because of where in the town his father was and where he would go. But his mother tried to keep a close eye on him, and when he was born, she had promised him to God to become a priest because she had children before then who had died in infancy. And when Stalin was born, she prayed and prayed to God that he would live so he could do something great for God. However, that didn't end up happening. She sent him to a seminary, and this is where the second turning point in his life happens. Stalin was a really intelligent, gifted young boy. However, he had a few issues. He had a pockmarked face from contracting probably smallpox as a little child. He had been hit by a cart. His arms weren't the same length, if I remember correctly, and his legs also weren't quite right, and his feet were webbed. He had webbed feet, his toes were webbed. But he was still very intelligent. He was bright. He was smaller than everybody else, but he had this charisma that made him be able to get people to do what he wanted. So that's why nobody messed with him at school, and if they did, he had people who were going to help him. But anyway, he was bright, he was smart, he was in the choir, and he was a good singer, and he was for God for a while. But then, as a teenager, he went through his, I don't want to call it the teenage angst stage, but it was a teenage angst stage, where he started writing poetry for the newspaper, which was really cool. When you look at his poetry, it's actually really not that bad. Such as, where once the strings of his lyre resounded, the mob has set a vial filled with poison. Before the hounded man crying, drink accursed one, such is thy lot, the reward for thy songs. We have no need of your truth and your heavenly strains, was a line from one of his poems. Now he was very, very gifted, but then one day he started questioning. He was the kid in the back of the religious classroom being like, psst, guess what? God isn't real, and here's why. He got into some very interesting literature, started questioning everything. He became a Marxist. He read the Communist Manifesto and a bunch of other political documents. And he got in trouble a lot at the seminary, an outrageous amount, to the point where he ended up getting kicked out. Some of his offenses at the seminary were reading forbidden books, answering the inspector rudely when they searched his room. They were looking for things and they found Marxist literature. They're finding all sorts of things with him. but the real reason he got expelled was failure to sit for an examination. Now, at this point in the story, he had stopped going by Soso, and he had been called Koba. Now, the meaning for this was because Koba was the hero of his favorite book in his youth, The Parricide, a work of a Georgian author named Kazbegi. To put it short, Koba was sort of like a Georgian Robin Hood, and he was like robbing the rich and still trying to like do good things. And Koba would become his revolutionary pseudonym for the next like several years, especially as he becomes like imprisoned, sent to Siberia. He goes all over the place. He's constantly on the run. He ends up getting married though. He marries a woman, except he's barely ever home, and eventually she dies under some interesting circumstances, and later on it was found out that it was probably a suicide. And it was 9 months after the birth of their son Yakov. An interesting thing about Yakov ended up going to, like later on when USSR is warring, he's captured by the Germans, and the Germans are like, we have your son, and if you give us this like really high-ranking German official, we'll give you your son back. And Stalin's response was very, very brutal, like a lot of his other responses. Instead of being filled with concern for his son, he instead responded negatively and was thinking of his son as a traitor because he surrendered rather than just shooting himself, instead of just killing himself so he wouldn't be captured. He saw that as a traitor move and was like, why would I switch this high-ranking German official for a mere field soldier? And his son ended up dying in a concentration camp in Germany. This ranks as high in his responses as Stalin saying to Winston Churchill after he said, God is on the Allied side. God is on your side? Is he a conservative? The devil's on my side. He's a good communist. Stalin has no chill. He has no chill throughout his entire story. But yeah, those in his early life, pre-dictator, are what I call the 3 turning points. His childhood with his abusive father, his being kicked out of the seminary, and his new life as Koba.